Frank Lundy was the only person who made me sweat. And not just because he was tall, charming, and carried a bigger badge than most. No. He looked at me like he already knew. And that was a problem. He never said it out loud, never actually pointed the finger, but every interaction felt like a silent interrogation. So, was he on to me, or was I just projecting? Let's go back and trace every moment he got a little too close to the truth. And to me. Lundy was the kind of man who could shake your hand and scan your soul at the same time. He didn't come to Miami looking for me. But from the moment he stepped into the precinct I could feel it. That sharp, quiet instinct that made him more dangerous than any serial killer I ever hunted. The irony? From day one he was hunting me. Well, technically, he was hunting the Bay Harbor butcher. Too bad that was also the guy pouring a cup of coffee right next to him every morning. He assembled his Bay Harbor butcher task force like a chessboard. LaGuerta, Batista, Deborah, and eventually me, replacing Masuka, right in the room with the killer. I had a front row seat to my own manhunt. I sat in those meetings like a shark in a fish market, listening to them sketch out my silhouette in ink. Organized, forensic expertise, inside familiarity with police procedures, Lundy said, his voice calm, methodical, deadly. I nodded, took notes, tried not to vomit, and I realized, if they kept this up, they'd map me down to the nanosecond that I cleaned my slides. So I did what any serial killer with a flair for prose would do. I wrote them a love letter, a fake manifesto, the Bay Harbor butcher's message to the world, every line a decoy. One paragraph hinted at vigilante justice, another muttered about clinical detachment, a third waxed poetic on chaotic impulses, shredded my handwriting style, mixed up fonts, even threw in a fake ransom note for good measure. When it showed up at the precinct, the task force went into overdrive. He thinks he's saving lives, someone said, or he's twistedly chaotic, came another. A third piped in, maybe he's driven by trauma, or pure adrenaline. They chased every rabbit hole I planted. Psychological, moral, and random. For a moment I could breathe, but Lundy, he just folded the pages, his eyes never leaving mine. Interesting, he said. He wants us to look everywhere and nowhere at the same time. No one else caught it. But Lundy did.
Why were they chosen?
You looking for a pattern?
He wasn't fooled. He was curious, and curiosity in the hands of Frank Lundy is worse than any manifesto, because he doesn't need a clear target. He just needs a scent, and that scent was me. The field morgue was cold, clinical, improvised. The fluorescent lights buzzed like flies over a carcass. Tables lined with bodies, tagged and stacked, surrounded me. Most people would feel sick, haunted, but I felt calm. I knew these faces. I'd ended their stories, neatly, cleanly, by my rules. It was like walking through a gallery of past work, a portfolio, if you will. I looked down at one of them and almost smiled, not because I enjoyed the killing, but because the order of it, the precision, brought me a strange sense of peace. Then I heard him. Fascinating, isn't it? It was Lundy. He stepped into view like a ghost who already knew he'd been summoned. Each of these victims has a story, he said, but the one we don't know is the killer's. He didn't ask about ligature marks or blood spatter angles. He talked about principles. The Bay Harbor butcher has a pattern, not just in method, but in motive. These victims, they're all violent offenders. Killers themselves. Monsters. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the corpse. Some twisted set of principles, he continued. The worst killers in history are usually the ones who think the murders were somehow just. My heart didn't race, but something colder shifted in my chest, because that's exactly how I operate. Harry's code is my North Star, but it's still a justification, a structure that gives my darkness rules. Lundy wasn't describing a suspect. He was describing me. He glanced sideways at me. I gave a polite smile, one of my better masks. There's never any justification for killing, I said. Then Lundy tilted his head slightly.
But there's never any justification for killing.
No. Well, one, of course. To save an innocent life.
Just like that, the air shifted. He wasn't contradicting me. He was correcting me. And not just in theory, in philosophy. That moment has stuck with me, not just because of the words, but because of how he looked at me when he said them. Not judgmental, not suspicious, just aware. He saw the nostalgia in my eyes, the way I moved through that room like it was sacred ground, before I even realized that he was in there. And as a seasoned profiler, he had to have noticed. Not everyone gazes at crime scene photos like family portraits. Not everyone smiles quietly while walking past a corpse they created. But he didn't say anything. He didn't arrest me. Maybe it was because he couldn't prove it. Or maybe, and this is the part that keeps me up at night, maybe he agreed. Maybe he believed that some killings, when done to protect the innocent, weren't so unjustifiable after all. Lundy didn't need a smoking gun. Sometimes all he needed was a casual conversation. He called me into his office one afternoon. No formalities, no warning, just, "So the Rodrigo case, let's talk about that one." "Okay, kinda blew it, didn't you?" he asked. He was right. The blood spatter pattern I filed should have been airtight. Instead, it was suspiciously sloppy. Sloppy enough to let Rodrigo walk. Of course, that was the point. Rodrigo walked straight into my kill room. But now Lundy was standing between me and that mistake, turning it over like evidence under a microscope. "You've been one of our most consistent analysts," he said. Strange to see something this off. He didn't accuse, he just observed. Calmly, critically. I gave him my standard excuse. Overworked, distracted, human error. He nodded, jotted something in his notebook, then moved on. But he never really did, and neither did I. A few days later, Deborah and Batista, still following Lundy's breadcrumbs, picked up the Rodrigo trail again. Lundy had assigned them to revisit the scene. Nothing fancy, just routine follow-up. But routine doesn't exist in a Frank Lundy investigation. They tracked down Lenny Asher, a paranoid neighbor with stacks of handwritten journals, and enough tin foil to block out the NSA. Most of it was noise, but then came a note dated the night Rodrigo disappeared. A license plate number. They ran it. The car belonged to a drug dealer named Charlie Lewis. The problem is, Lewis had already been arrested 4 days before Rodrigo vanished.
The only people allowed access to those vehicles are members of the Miami Metro Police Department. Holy shit.
Bay Harbor Butcher is one of our own.
We keep this to ourselves for now.
In his vehicle, impounded by Miami Metro, which meant the car used to transport Rodrigo to his death, was one only law enforcement could have accessed. There was no outside hacker, no black market thief, just keys, a badge, and a parking permit. The killer wasn't just familiar with police procedure, he was actually on the inside. I could feel the spotlight warming my face. Lundy had everything but a fingerprint, and I had nothing but time to run out the clock. During a task force briefing, Batista reported that algae samples pulled from the victims matched water from 3 freshwater marinas, Turkey Creek, Sunset Keys, and Coral Cove, where I docked my boat, the slice of life. "My family had it there for years," Deb said casually, not realizing she'd just handed Lundy a breadcrumb with my name on it. "It's not a commercial marina," Lundy observed later, as he and Deborah walked to docks. "No IDs on the hulls, poor lighting. Come out here at night, no one would know what the hell you're doing." Then with the same calm certainty that made him so dangerous, Lundy said, "We'll set up 24-hour surveillance on all 3 marinas." That evening I returned to the marina, and just like I always did after a kill, I wiped it down, bleached the deck, checked the bilge, scrubbed for trace evidence. Routine, familiar, safe, but I didn't know I was being recorded. Didn't know that Lundy had just aimed a camera at the one place I thought was untouchable, because by the time I realized I was under surveillance, it was already too late. When Deborah told me Lundy had installed 24-hour surveillance at Coral Cove, I did what any responsible serial killer who's about to get caught would do. That night I went to sabotage the system, but Lundy had locked the door, too secure for a casual break-in. The next morning the system went live. Streaming footage from Coral Cove flickered onto the monitors, and just like that, I was about to make my screen debut. The Bay Harbor Butcher, starring Dexter Morgan. I had seconds, so I pulled a fire alarm. As the station evacuated, I stayed behind, ducked into Lundy's office, and scrubbed the footage. No backup, no copy, just static and silence. Next came the blood slides. It was the kind of discovery that made headlines, and turned my stomach. A wooden slide box, 40 neatly labeled glass slides, each one with a thin smear of blood. Each one represented a life I'd erased with precision. I kept it hidden in my air conditioner vent. Safe, private, mine, until Dokes found it, that is. He broke into my place, took the box, and then, poof, it reappeared in the trunk of his car. The FBI found it during a search. Case closed, they said. But before the paperwork was signed, Lundy had one last question. He brought me into Captain Matthews' office. No cuffs, no accusations, and handed me a tray of blood slides to examine along with that calm, unshakable stare. "Explain it to us," he demanded.
Explain it to us.
Knowing that saying the wrong thing would be a confession. "Trophies," is all I gave him. I swallowed. Slowly, deliberately, but the whole time I could feel the sweat pooling behind my neck. He nodded once.
That's what I thought.
He said, looking at Matthews, but we both knew what it meant. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. And in that moment I realized he wasn't asking for insight. He was looking for a match. These weren't just glass slides to him. They were fingerprints, psychological ones.
I know this will come as a shock to you, Morgan, but our primary suspect is someone you know well.
And even though they were found in Doak's car, I knew Lundy was still building a profile, and I was still the blueprint. Doak's was dead, the slide box had been found, and the Bay Harbor butcher case was closed. Officially, the FBI declared victory. Lundy gave a final briefing. There was no celebration, no high fives. Just another closed file. He didn't say much. He didn't need to, because even though the case was closed, I don't think Frank Lundy ever believed it. He just couldn't prove anything yet. When Lundy came back, he wasn't here for me, but ghosts don't need names to haunt you. He asked about Rita, about Harrison, about regret, questions with teeth, the kind that dig under your ribs while you're trying to smile politely. He never said Bay Harbor, but I still heard it, in every pause. We sat together like two war veterans comparing scars, except his were emotional, mine were dismembered. He talked about unfinished business, about death, legacy. I said all the right words, but he looked at me like he knew that I didn't mean a single one of them. He didn't accuse me. He just made me wonder what would have happened if he had more time. Christine Hill pulled the trigger before Lundy could finish his story. Or mine. He died chasing Trinity, but deep down, I think he knew he was always circling something else. Me, he just never got the chance to say it. Frank Lundy never said I was a killer, but he didn't have to. His profile, calculated and precise, sketched out everything but my face. Ritualistic, forensically skilled, law enforcement adjacent. That's not a guess, that's my mirror. The Marina surveillance, the Rodrigo case, the manifesto, they weren't dead ends. They were pressure points. And every time I adjusted, Lundy adjusted with me. He wasn't chasing Dokes, he was watching all of us, and he knew what to look for. He just didn't have proof, and that made him more dangerous than anyone who ever got close. He didn't want headlines. He wanted certainty, and maybe, when he didn't get it, he walked away. But I don't think he ever stopped suspecting. He saw something in me, a pattern, a calm, a kind of cold calculation that didn't belong in a lab coat. And when he said, to save an innocent life, he wasn't offering moral clarity. He was sending a message. I see what you're doing, and I understand why. That's the part I never forgot. He didn't try to stop me, but he didn't let me off the hook either. Of course, not everyone gave me that kind of quiet leeway. Some men didn't speculate. They knew. If Frank Lundy circled me with intuition, James Dokes ran straight at me with certainty. If you want to see how close he came to dragging my secret into the light, you need to watch what happens when someone sees the monster in plain sight.